Another edition of EFRTV Economic Finance Report. Samuel Bassey, businessman Bassey. Today I have a special guest. He was ambassador of President George W. Bush's administration from 2004 to 2007. He's done many diplomatic tours, including Nigeria and South Africa. I have Ambassador John Campbell with me, again from 2004 to 2007 under President George W. Bush's administration. Thank you, sir.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. EFRTV, the little that I've told you about, is pretty much an economic and finance show that deals with millennials all over the globe. What we do is we focus on the economy, finance, job creation, real estate development as it pertains to the millennials. We have a couple of different slogans that pertain to the millennials, but one of the slogans that we use is the millennials are not only just tomorrow, but they're today. And so what we do is we focus on the economic aspects as well as financial aspects pertaining to millennials. The last couple of weeks we've been kind of catering into Africa, especially because of the elections that's happening in Nigeria and other disparities around the continent. And you being an expert, I was fortunate to try to reach out to you because of what you've been able to showcase and your expertise in Nigeria and South Africa. You being a diplomatic servant as well as the ambassador, our previous ambassador. So I just wanted to just find out, from you, other networks, other shows, they focus on the political and social aspect. We do that too, but our spin is really more focused on the economic and financial aspect as it pertains to the youth generation, the millennial generation. This actually is pertaining to the Nigerian millennials. We have a big Nigerian following, and getting your insight, your expertise on what's going on, is pretty prevalent. And I thank you again for inviting us. When we spoke last week, there was an election about to occur. Certain developments have now transpired to kind of change that for a couple of weeks, and we want to kind of get your insight.
Well, actually, the elections have been postponed for 6 weeks.
Right.
Ostensibly, the Nigerian National Security Advisor said that the security services in Nigeria, including the military, could not provide security for the elections to take place.
Correct.
Because on the 14th of February, when the presidential elections were to take place, the security services say they are launching a major initiative against Boko Haram, the radical Islamist terrorist group that is operating in northern Nigeria.
Correct.
The implication is that in 6 weeks' time, the military will be able to defeat Boko Haram. For a good many of us, this is rather puzzling, since Boko Haram has existed since either 2009 or 2011, depending on how you define its origin. And the Nigerian military has been remarkably unsuccessful in dealing with it. How that will change in the upcoming 6 weeks is extremely unclear.
I'm glad you brought that up, just going right into the elections and the postponement. Just to add on, first of all, a lot of people who are watching stated, especially Secretary of State John Kerry, he felt that there might be meddling into what's going on in the elections to kind of buy the president, Goodluck Jonathan, some time. What do you feel about those accusations?
Well, rigging of elections in Nigeria has been ubiquitous. It has been a characteristic of virtually all Nigerian elections since the restoration of civilian government in 1999. So suspicion that there may be some link between postponement of the elections and ultimate rigging is understandable. However, I would suggest that evidence is lacking.
Right.
So we have to be careful at this particular point. The other thing about election rigging in Nigeria is that it's done by everybody. So that, yes, it's done by incumbents, but it's also done by opposition.
Right.
So it has sometimes been suggested that rigging tends to cancel itself out. That said, no incumbent president has ever lost an election in Nigeria.
Right.
I should say no incumbent president, nor a candidate who has been anointed by an incumbent president. None of them have ever lost.
That brings a great point. A couple of speeches that President Jonathan has indicated recently, in a couple of sources, he emphasized that the millennial and the youth, you know, they are the next ones up. You know, that the next president has to be under 60. You know, he keeps emphasizing that. What do you feel that the millennials, you know, the people born in the 1980s all the way to early 2000s, play in Nigeria and in the elections?
It varies considerably from region to region. In the Lagos-Ibadan corridor, which is the heart of the modern Nigerian economy, millennials are a group that can be identified and are self-conscious. They will call themselves millennials.
Right.
They don't exist in other parts of the country, for example, in the north or in the northeast. In terms of millennial direct involvement in the election, in the past, it's mostly been through the youth corpers. Youth corpers are those who have graduated from university who serve in a youth corps, normally outside of the particular area that they come from. And they operate kind of like a domestic peace corps. They were involved in the elections of 2011 in much of the actual logistical work of making elections go forward. They, in terms of age, are all millennials.
Right, right. Are they? Would you say are involved as heavily as they were in 2011, or it pretty depreciated?
It remains to be seen. We don't really know. Now, a certain number of youth corpers were actually murdered during in conjunction with the elections of 2011. So that may lead to some hesitancy about their participation in 2015. We'll just have to see.
Now, segueing to the next question, you have people, capitalists, if I like to say, you know, business entities, business people like Aliko Dangote, who's actually based in Nigeria and is considered the richest African in the continent. He indicates that a lot of the problems that are happening in Africa, and specifically in Nigeria, is because of the lack of job creation.
Yes.
That the youth need, you know, Boko Haram is primarily a spin, and it's funny because, you know, Aliko Dangote is from that northern region.
Yes, indeed.
Right. And he indicates a lot of that is the lack of the resources, especially job creation. Same thing with Tony Elumelu, you know, who's more of he's a Yoruba from the Jos area. These powerful men and others, elites of Nigeria, if you like to call them, indicate that job creation, that the private sector is going to be the one to really change the dynamics in Africa, and especially in Nigeria, because of the burgeoning growth rate of the young individuals, millennials. What do you have to say with, as far as like the future of the millennials in Africa? And
well, it's perfectly true that youth unemployment, or young people unemployment, in Nigeria is extremely high. We don't actually know how much it is, but estimates are up to 50% are unemployed. Right now, this is a particularly difficult time because of the collapse of oil prices. The collapse of oil prices directly impacts on the Nigerian government. More than 70% of its revenue comes from oil, and more than 90% of its foreign exchange comes from oil. The collapse in oil prices means that the value of the Naira has dropped massively against the US dollar, and the Lagos Stock Exchange is in the doldrums. When you add all of this together, it means that there is not the capital available for job creation now that there would have been, say, a year or two ago, or that one hopes will be available a year or two hence. Right now is a difficult period.
A lot of analysts, especially within the Treasury Department, they indicate that, you know, Nigeria is in a transitioning period to diversify, so they're not as dependent on oil. Goodluck Jonathan likes to tote that, you know, he was the one to transform Nigeria to be more into a more agricultural nation and try to diversify from the oil dependency.
That is certainly an aspiration. The extent to which that aspiration has been realized, however, I think is open to question. The very fact that more than 70% of the Nigerian state's total revenue comes from oil, and the very fact that more than 90% of its foreign exchange comes from oil, indicates that oil remains dead in the center of the Nigerian economy. It has been the policy of successive Nigerian governments to foster agricultural development, for example, reform of the power sector, to encourage manufacturing. All of this takes time to achieve.